Over the last few years, people have migrated out of estate cars and into SUVs. Why? Well, estate cars are a bit been there, done that. They've been around for a long time, whereas SUVs, they're on trend. They are the thing to be seen in and to be driving. And they look good, they're spacious, they've got good ground clearance, good ride height, and they actually drive quite well as well. But, and it is a big but, look at what the estate car offers. You still have space, you still have practicality, but that lower ride height means the car will handle better, it will be more economical. The default choice shouldn't always be an SUV. But to bring people back into estate cars, you need to have good looking estate cars, you need to have estate cars that excite you, that interest you. Thankfully, I think I'm driving one. This is a new Peugeot 508 SW and it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, if you enjoy watching our videos, it really does make a difference if you subscribe, if you watch them regularly, and if you click the little bell icon to get notifications. So please, if you haven't done that already, go and do that. And also make sure you like this video, make sure you comment on it, make sure you share it, and visit newmotoring.com. You join me today in sunny Portugal, Lisbon specifically. Although it's sunny right this second, but every 20 minutes or so the weather completely changes. So I can see some massive great black clouds over on the horizon. So if it suddenly gets dark or there's a lightning bolt that, I don't know, destroys that cafe, well, it's just the weather playing up. Classic car launch. The weather is entirely unpredictable. Now, of course, I've driven the 508 a couple of times now. The first time was on the car's international launch in Monaco, but we only really got a short flavour of it. But more recently, I spent a week with it in the UK and I did more than 1,000 miles in it. I drove it up to Scotland and back, so I got to know it much, much better. And while it isn't perfect, I really, really like the 508. It is such a big step on from the old 508. As for the SW, well, look at it. It is a really, really good looking car and it's got some real muscle to it as well. Those hips, those strong hips at the back, it's a real looker. I really, really like it. I'm tempted to say it's actually better looking than the Saloon. Perhaps I'll leave that ultimate judgment up to you, because what I like, you might really hate. But I think it's really pretty. Inside, it is exactly the same as the Saloon. You've got a small steering wheel, which is classic Peugeot now with their iCockpit design, so you have to put the wheel lower than you might want to normally, but you do get used to it. And you've just got clever use of materials everywhere. There's this weird kind of grey silver wood up here on the doors, and across the dashboard you've got these piano key buttons that control everything from the radio to the navigation. It's just a really interesting design. And the instrument cluster up here, that can be customised, so you can see the dials, you can see the navigation, you can see all sorts of different things depending on what you want to prioritise. Obviously, the biggest difference between this and the Saloon is the fact that the boot is huge. The 508 Saloon isn't a broom cupboard, it isn't a tiny space in the boot, but it's even bigger. You can put pretty much anything you want in it, apart from another 508. Anything smaller, maybe a 208, I reckon you get in the back. The choice of engines and gearboxes is the same in the SW as it is in the Saloon. So you can have a 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine with 180 brake horsepower or 225 brake horsepower, and both of those engines come with the 8-speed automatic gearbox, the EAT8. If you want a diesel, you can have a 1.5 litre turbo diesel with 130 brake horsepower or 160 brake horsepower, or you can have a 2 litre turbo diesel with 180 brake horsepower. Again, with those you get them all with the 8-speed automatic gearbox, apart from the 130 brake horsepower diesel. With that you have the choice of the 8-speed auto or a 6-speed manual. I still think it's a bit of a shame that you can't get the 6-speed manual with the other engines, just because some people will want a manual gearbox, but that's the way it is. This car has the 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine. It's got 180 brake horsepower and 186 pounds-feet of torque. It's an engine I haven't driven before in the 508. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 8 seconds exactly, and the top speed is 140 miles an hour. I have to say, it's not the most inspiring engine. It doesn't make the nicest noise. If I put my foot down, it's just a bit of a noise really, but it doesn't perform that badly. 8 seconds to 62 is pretty respectable. It pulls from about 2,000 RPM, just above that, to just above 5,000 RPM. The red line is 6,000 RPM. I think though that the more powerful version of this engine, the 225 brake horsepower version, will be the more inspiring, the more engaging, more exciting choice. It's worth noting though that there will soon be hybrid versions of the 508. You'll have a 508 Saloon hybrid and a 508 SW hybrid. They will have the 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine with 180 brake horsepower that I have here, but that will be paired with a 110 brake horsepower electric motor, or 80 kilowatts. Total power will be 225 brake horsepower, so it will be the same output as the more powerful version of this engine, but it will produce less CO2, it will use less fuel, and you'll be able to drive it on electric power alone. The first 508 I drove was 180 brake horsepower diesel, and that had the 8-speed automatic gearbox. But you might remember more recently I drove the 130 brake horsepower diesel, and that had the 6-speed manual. And while it wasn't the best, the slickest manual gearbox I've used, as I said, I think it's a bit of a shame that you can't get that gearbox in other versions of the 508. But this 8-speed auto, it's a really good gearbox. It's smooth, the response from the paddles is very good as well, and it knows what gear to be in at the right time. It's a very good automatic gearbox. All in all, the 508 weighs 70 kilos less like for like than the old 508, but this, the SW, weighs around 40 kilos more than the Saloon. So the Saloon weighs 1,420 kilos. That's if you get any of the engines apart from the 2 litre diesel. If you go for the 2 litre diesel, it's 1,530 kilos. So add on pretty much 40 kilos to each of those cars and you get the weight for this. But to be honest, you don't really notice it. It isn't a big enough gain for you to really feel it. Steering, there's no real feel or feedback, but the weight and the response is actually quite good. That being said, there are drive modes down here on the center console, so you can flick through Sport, Normal and Eco. And in Normal, it's absolutely fine. I think it's probably the mode that you should leave it in. In Sport, it feels a little bit artificial. It feels a little bit over-assisted. What it does do is also sharpen up the throttle, so it feels a little bit quicker, but it does change the steering a bit too much. Oh, and it also pumps synthesized engine noise into the cabin, but I feel like they've toned it down, because in a 5008 or 3008, if you've got this drive mode switch on the center console, the noise that it pumps through the cabin is quite full on, but in this it's much more subtle, much quieter. To be honest, I think I prefer it. Suspension is comfortable and composed. There are some bumps and surfaces that can unsettle the wheels slightly, but it doesn't take too long for them to settle back down again. It's definitely been engineered towards comfort. It's not playful or engaging, but it still does drive very well. It's just competent. It's very, very competent. And the price for all this French estate wonderfulness? Well, the exact prices haven't been confirmed yet, but Peugeot says that it will cost about £1,600 more than the Saloon to buy the SW. Do I like it? Yeah, I really do. Good though SUVs are, and the 3008, for example, is a really, really good SUV. It's one of the best. There's something so appealing about a good-looking estate car, and this is such a good-looking estate car. Like the Saloon, this isn't the most exciting or engaging thing to drive, but it looks good. It still drives really well, and it is such an improvement over the old 508. I can't stress that enough. So what do you think of the 508 SW? Would you have the estate or would you have the standard Saloon? Or perhaps the bigger decision, would you have the estate or would you have the SUV? Would you have something like a 3008? Let me know in the comments below. Come to Portugal, they said. It'll be nice weather, they said. Ah. Ooh.